they work for. So first of all, we've got Nick Penev, who is the founder of Hello Tax. We've also got Jana, who is the founder of YLT Translations. And we've also got Pearl joining us from Frisbee, formerly known as First Class Shipping. So Nick, if you'd like to say a little bit more about yourself and what you do and your company.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. I have good news. I guess I just became the owner of Hello Tax. I am not the owner. I used to be a client of them, and now I run the partnership for Hello Tax. But actually, I'm a founder of another company called Extreme Power Brands, which is a partnership agency and network. And actually, two of my close partners are here today, Jana and Pearl. And actually, their first choice shipping was their old name. So, but they offer first class shipping as well. So, what I do on my end is, we help with Hello Tax. Sellers who are expanding in Europe with the VAT compliance, because without VAT, you cannot sell or import anything in Europe. So this is the first thing we do. It's a very niche service. This is the only thing that Hello Tax provides, VAT compliance for e-commerce sellers. So we don't do anything for you guys if you need VAT in your home country, only when you expand outside of your home country. And we help a lot of non-new companies and e-commerce sellers. And the founders used to be ex-Amazon sellers. I used to be an e-commerce seller myself. I was selling in Europe for 10 years. And right now, this is what we do at Hello Tax. On the other side, I also have a partnership agency and network where we actually help companies to grow through partnerships. But today we're going to talk only about, I guess, the VAT compliance. And that's pretty much what I do. I'm a remote junkie. I live on the beach in the summer. I will do my last beach stint in the weekend, but that's another topic. So I'll let Jana and Pearl introduce themselves as well. So thank you again for the invitation, Tom.
Thank you, Nick. Jana, over to you.
So my name is Jana. I saw that you intentionally did not pronounce my last name, which is great. I usually suggest people not to try. Also, it was misspelled as well, so it's fine. So I'm the owner of YLT Translations, and we help sellers expand to all global international marketplaces. We've been working with the private label sellers, 7-8 figure, but also with bigger brands like Nestle, Mattel, National Geographic, like a bunch of very big names in corporations. And today I will be talking about content, keywords, mistakes sellers make when expanding internationally, how to avoid that, kind of trying to keep it like very simple and basic. And a lot of sellers and big brands don't think about these things, but these are actually the crucial things that will help you when you expand internationally. And thank you so much for having me on your webinar.
Very welcome. Thank you for joining. Pearl, tell us more about yourself and Frisbee.
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm Pearl. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Frisbee. We just rebranded from First Choice Shipping. I don't know where First Class came from. That was actually really funny, but it's all good. First Choice Shipping, we used to be, up until 2 weeks ago. We just rebranded in time for Amazon's Accelerate show. So that was pretty cool. That was pretty amazing. So what we specialize in is a full global expansion solution. And we work with different partners to make it happen. But pretty much the logistics end of it, we don't do the agency side, the listings and the localization, something like what Jana does. What we help is to actually get your product into FBA, into Amazon's global markets like Amazon UK, Canada, etc. So the goal is to really make sure that from a product compliance end, you are set up in the right way. We guide you on the VAT, making sure that you work with people like Nick or others, that it gets done the right way. And then ultimately the shipping. We are Amazon's #1 recommended provider for global expansion. And thanks for having us on. We're excited to speak to the UK or Europe audience this time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So let's get into some depth and start tackling some of these questions and topics. I think let's start broad and simple to start with. So I know some of the answers to this question might be obvious, but why should the Amazon sellers, and especially those joining us on this webinar today, why should you be looking to expand internationally? I think one of the obvious things is going to be the potential for a whole new slew of customers. But Jana, why should people be looking to expand?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of analysis recently and comparing the competitors. I do a lot of speaking worldwide, and then I always gonna try to find some new data, something that it's going to make people sell more international, like see the full potential. So one of the things why people should go abroad is that you would be surprised how many of your competitors are not doing a great job when it comes to content and keywords. I've analyzed so many like top selling products, let's say on the German marketplace, and from let's say 15 top competitors that are selling wet brush, I would say that only maybe 3 know what they're doing content wise, because usually and unfortunately, if sellers don't speak another language, they just don't care usually how good or bad their content is. And then what happens is that after you launch a product, the first 6 months, everything goes well, but then 6 months later, that still start to drop. That's usually because of the content that's kind of confusing and people don't understand it. And the sellers don't usually have like good keywords. And that is the situation with like almost every product in any other non-English marketplace. And this is definitely how you can get ahead of your competitors using content and keywords. As I like to say that, you know, like when you have a product, like images are definitely number 1, but keywords are definitely number 2, because without having those keywords, nobody will be able to find your product. So definitely checking your competitors today, like after this webinar, and I'm sure that you could be very much surprised at like how bad of a job they've been doing with content and keywords, and probably with their PPC campaigns using the same keywords they have in their front end listing to their PPC campaigns. So that's I think a good of a reason for me.
Brilliant. Pearl or Nick, do you have any answers as to why Amazon sellers should look to expand internationally, whether that's moving from the UK to mainland Europe or over to the US or some of those other bigger markets?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, because that's my topic in all the webinars. I mean, it's just numbers now. If you're selling in the States and if you're not selling in Europe, Europe has 700 million population. 400 of those are over 18. So you're missing on exposing your product to a whole new continent. So we're just talking just for Europe. You know, this is what we cover, but Pearl can expand on the other markets. But the main thing is that there are clients who have not seen your product, and if you don't try, you will never know. And there is multiple tools for product research, so you can actually see who are your competitors in Europe, who are your competitors in Asia, Middle East, Japan, and you can see, you can actually get some analysis of what you might expect. Of course, it's not 100% accurate, but it's enough data to actually make you do the next step. And then, of course, I mean, you need to try. I mean, this is the one thing. Europe is hard, but that's why Iana is doing what she's doing. You need to have everything localized, translated. Then you need to set up the VAT. One false assumption is that you need multiple VATs, but we're going to go into that later on. But the thing is now, it's a huge potential, and especially right now when funding is tight and sales are going down. So the easiest thing to do is go to new markets. I mean, of course, but you need to have a certain size, but this is as simple as I can say that.
Yeah, and you mentioned not needing multiple VATs. I know we're going to get into more depth on that later, and that's because like that's the benefit of going with Amazon, right? That they exist as one entity, so you only need to set it up once. And if you want to move into those other markets, it's a lot simpler than if you were trying to move into big box stores or go through other recon platforms.
I mean, actually, the VAT regime in Europe was changed, but of course, Amazon are helping that. But I think we're going to discuss that in more details. But now it's much easier. Just people are scared from Europe. The Americans, they come here for the vacation. They don't want to come and sell here. I mean, we're good for fun and we're good for business. So, and this is what Pearl is doing. You know, they're pushing companies to come to Europe because it's harder to start, but much easier once they establish themselves here in the long term.
Thanks, Nick. Pearl, it would be great to get some insights from yourself as well.
So another point I wanted to mention is the currency difference. Right now, the Europe currency is dropping a lot. So there's a lot of potential to buy product in Europe, ship it out, and which was something that we're seeing a big increase from US sellers. They're sourcing product in Europe because obviously they're gaining a lot more from the dollar. So if there's any listeners listening in from the US, that's something that you want to consider. But in general, you know, having the diversity and having the option of going into a marketplace that's less saturated, obviously is something that people really want to consider. Way less competition. And of course, people don't realize, but there's so much demand throughout the world for products that you are creating with your private label. And it might take some time for you, to find that right, marketing pitch, and something, let's say, that Yana could help with, making sure that the words or the copy that you're putting out there is attracting your buyer. But once you get it, and like Nick said, it's a little bit more difficult than, let's say, launching your product with something that you're more familiar with. And that's the reason why you're going to find less people trying to do it. And for those reasons, you'll end up having a lot more success when when you work harder for something, automatically end up seeing more success, and you're in it for the long run. And we've always seen a trend of, the first to get there are the last ones to actually leave that marketplace, and they're the ones that really end up seeing the longevity of it. So whenever we have, a new marketplace and Amazon launches, we're always pushing people to be the first ones to get there. But in general, there are so many different variables on why you want to expand. But I guess the most cliche one is, why have all your eggs in one basket and rely on one marketplace? And there are so many different options to do it in a really, really simple, easy way. So, now is a perfect time because Q4 is right around the corner. So it's something that we definitely, that's our core business, and we see people having huge success with it.
And that was going to lead me nicely into my next question. Like, when is the best time to expand? I know you've just mentioned Q4, but I assume most people start selling in their native and their local country, because that's what they know and what they're experienced with. Do you recommend people, like you say, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket? Do you recommend sellers start selling internationally pretty soon on their journey, or wait until they've got an established product within their local marketplace first? Or is it all to do with seasonality and the demand of that product?
Right. So seasonality is actually a good point. So that's something people want to consider, right? Australia and the US have different summers. So if something doesn't go well in the US, you always have an option of seeing how it's gonna do in Australia. But as a general rule, I definitely always tell people to maximize whatever they can within whichever marketplace they're currently in. Learn on the job, as they say, and make all the mistakes that you need to make, and then make those same mistakes one at a time. You don't want to start repeating those same things in a different marketplace, but because even though it's, let's say, an English speaking marketplace, the culture is slightly different. People just, every country has its nuances. So you do want to first really, really learn the trade, learn Amazon. Amazon selling is not easy, even though there will be many people that will tell you that it is, but it's very, very difficult. As a former Amazon seller, I could tell you that personally. And I would say first get whatever you can in the existing marketplace, and once you see traction, then definitely go for it.
Yeah, and is the size of the other marketplaces, is that something to factor in as well? Because a lot of the mistakes we've seen from some of our UK sellers is they just want to jump into the US, but the US is an infinitely larger marketplace, not only in terms of the number of sellers, but the number of customers that are available over there as well. Is that something that people should bear in mind as well?
Yeah, I think this covers a little bit more from the previous question. People do stuff which is easy. So, but obviously, if it's too easy, more people are going to be doing that. So, and the thing is, for example, Germany, obviously, German is hard language. Yana knows that. But the thing is, in Germany, they have some loopholes for US companies and English speakers. So they accept your documents in English. Special tax authority deals with you. So there is ways that they can make it easy for you. You just need to do a little more steps, like use Yana to work for localization translation. And even like they said earlier, selling in the USA doesn't mean that you use the same copy like in the States. I'm not sure. I was in a webinar and they were giving example with like practice and training. I think practice is what you call in the States, training is in the UK. So obviously, if it's not localized, people will not feel that you're actually local, and they're not going to buy your stuff. So as simple as that.
Yeah. Brilliant. And with this discussion of expansion into other markets and specifically Europe, what has the market growth in the EU looked like recently, especially as we've come out the other side of COVID? It's also a post Brexit. Well, I don't say post Brexit, but we have now Brexited. What is the market growth in the EU looking like? I don't know if you've got any insights on that, Jana.
Well, basically, Amazon they have like officially published, but like we're gonna have Belgium like as the next marketplace, and then we're gonna get some more outside of Europe. But when it comes to Europe specifically, it's definitely going to be Belgium as the next one, and I think that definitely Amazon is going to plan on expanding more and more. I'm not sure how many more marketplaces they're gonna add in Europe, but I'm sure they're gonna add some more like in South America for sure, and Africa as well, which I think is a very, very good move. Also differentiate over there versus like Nigeria, they have like English as their official language, so you would not need to do any translations or anything like that. You can launch the products, but I think that so far we haven't seen a lot of sales in Sweden and in Poland, but these two countries are amazing marketplaces, like e-commerce marketplaces. And I mean, Polish marketplace called Allegro is top 10 marketplaces in Europe, like right after Tmall and Shopee, which is really a tremendous success. They're like 12,000 online stores. So I just think it's a matter of time, like when Amazon says like, okay, so now we're gonna focus more on this, because they have Allegro as the main competitor in Poland. What they did like in Middle East, like they just bought the competitor, which was Souk.com. It's like a marketplace. So they kind of, solve that problem that way. But I don't see them buying Allegro like at this point. And people are just going to use some buying from that marketplace over there as they were over buying Bol, let's say in the Netherlands. But I think that Amazon will take over pretty soon as they're just, say like, hey, so now we're doing this, like we're ready for it. So I just think that these two countries are very, very, very big, and they could be potentially very good in for Amazon as well. I just think it takes a little bit more time. But from other countries in Europe, I think that they're not going to add anything more apart from Belgium for any time. So they could be opening more for the global marketplaces.
Brilliant, thank you. And are there any other opportunities out there that have less or small competition as well? Like any other blue open opportunities that you're currently working on with your clients? And I open that question up to the whole panel. I know we've just talked about Belgium on the horizon, but you've seen like Netherlands, Sweden, Poland recently opened up. Are there any other markets out there that have low competition that our listeners today could potentially capitalize on, but others maybe not have jumped on board of?
Well, I could just add that, like, if you're selling in France, like you could definitely go like and sell on Cdiscount as well as another marketplace, a very, very big one, and much more simple than Amazon when it comes to the content and everything else, and also have Zalando in Germany as well. So I always suggest like to all the sellers, like, so as previously Pearl said, like don't keep everything, like don't keep all the eggs in one basket. That you could just diversify to other marketplaces. We don't only have to sell on Amazon. There's like so much like more opportunities for sellers once you go to international marketplace. You just don't have to do it for Amazon's sake. You can just like go elsewhere as well.
No, I think that's a very important thing to remember. Like it's not just the marketplaces that you're keeping all the eggs in. Like even though we're an Amazon agency, we're often recommending to our clients, like get into Walmart. It's like, there's not many people doing Walmart because most people associate Walmart with the big box stores in the high streets. But Walmart have PPC, they've got DSP as well, Target, and all those other e-com platforms. It's not just Google and Amazon and Shopify that you need to rely on. So I think that's an amazing point to make. And yeah, trying not to shoot myself in the foot there as an Amazon agency, but there are other platforms out there.
Walmart is definitely making an effort. Like we were just at the Sell and Scale Summit last week, and they had their booth there, and they were really, really trying to connect with sellers. So they're, people had a lot of issues with Walmart, but now you could tell that they're reaching out and they're really making that effort to understand what those issues were and setting up those channels of communication, which is, it's pretty refreshing to see that. So it was cool.
Yeah. By the way, sometimes smaller players, small partners are actually the best partners, because I'll give an example with my e-commerce business. We used a small fulfillment company which was based in Greece, where they're actually second client, and they grew a lot after that. And because we actually helped them out, they were with us for as long as we're actually running the business. So sometimes, if somebody is a small partner, doesn't mean that they're actually a bad option. So, and if people are not using them, this doesn't mean anything. So check it out, and obviously if you're happy, you might be surprised. And this actually is the same for small markets, because on mine now we're selling in like the Baltics, which are actually, I think they have like combined population of like 4 million, which is nothing, and nobody was doing that, and we were doing like 1,000 sales per day. So you just need to try that. I mean, you cannot know in advance where of course you can have some data, but like we said, now everybody goes to the US, they go to the UK, they go to Germany, and they forget all the other markets, which obviously is not good. I mean, you need to test it, and then you can see if your assumption is good or right or not.
Yeah, and there are other global markets as well. Like we've got Japan, we've got UAE and Australia, and quite often some of our clients are quite apprehensive or scared to go into marketing in those countries. I don't know if that's just because like geographically they're so far away from their headquarters, or the language barrier, especially when it comes to Japan and the UAE, where even the alphabet is completely different. Have any of you helped any of your clients expand into these areas with any level of success? I open that up to everyone.
Yeah, so we've seen huge success with these markets, especially Japan. Japan for some is a huge marketplace. It is considered a bigger marketplace than the Europe marketplace, but obviously, depends on what you're selling. So they're very into like organizational kind of stuff, like kitchen stuff, things to make the kitchen or the home look really organized. That's the culture of the people. So some, things like that are really, really popular there. But again, if you find the right, service provider or the right resource to help you with setting things up, it's really, really not difficult. I think it's just a mindset that people have with, how do I even begin? But if this is exactly the process, which, Yana could help you, let's say with the translations. We internally could actually help with the ACP registration, which is like the tax registration for Japan, and then with the logistics to make it happen. People see tremendous success, and the UAE as well. They're very into, high fashion items. They're into their car accessories, things like that. And people, see huge success with that. And I do want to give a mention to Canada as well. Canada somehow gets like a bad rap. When people think about it, it's like, oh, they have a very small population. The land is a big piece of land, but the population is definitely much smaller than, let's say, the US. But for people that are looking to branch out, it might just be something that is, I guess you could call it a simpler on their head kind of option, where again, it's English speaking, very similar culture. And, we see sellers doing very, very well. Like we've seen a huge uptick over COVID into Canada. We have some sellers that are doing close to 30% of whatever they're doing in the USA, which is a huge number. Have in mind, they're competing with less people, so their profitability margins are way higher. So it's something that people should really consider, and also a very easy way to transition into, the international market aside from the US.
Yeah. And talking of Canada, I know we're kind of going off question here. And they're not just English speaking either. There's a huge French speaking population in Canada. So how would you handle that, Yana, in terms of making sure your listings are optimized for a country that has 2 speaking languages, and like making sure everything's translated and finding out the niches of that French speaking population? And is there a difference between French Canadians and French in terms of like local dialect and nuances of the language and translations?
Yeah, so that's a quite often question I get, especially from the US sellers. So basically, you can leave English like as it is, like from the US to the one used in Canada, with just like tiny differences, like in a dialect, like maybe different words, but there's just like a really tiny differences. What's really important is that they use centimeters, not inches. So it's a different metrical system, which a lot of people don't know. And of course, French language is, Canadian French is different than European French. So in case you have someone in your team that's a European French speaker, they'll probably not do a good job checking your Canadian French. What we thought it was a rule of thumb is that you basically leave your English listings in English, like in a Canadian marketplace, and then use French keywords in backends. You will see those in keyword research, like whichever keyword pops up, like to be like a top search volume or relevancy, just put it in backends, because it will going to sound kind of weird if you put it in front end listings. From everyone that we've worked for the last 4 years, we've had only, I think it was a brand from Thrasio that wanted to have this like written in French, and that was it. And I think they didn't have like any amazing results just doing that. So I would just stick with English and then put French keywords in the backend for sure. The same as you would do for the US marketplace when you use like Spanish keywords in backends. And also even like in Europe, in some countries, like for instance, I just recently went to this conference in Poland, and there was a German seller, and he was using Turkish keywords in backends because he was selling something that the Turkish population in Germany was very interested in. So whenever you do like a keyword research and you find like this word that's kind of not the language of that country, just check out like what that keyword is, because maybe it means exactly what your product is. Just let's say it's in Turkish or French or like some other language, and then if you identify it, just put it in backends because it's clearly a relevant keyword for your product.
Brilliant, thank you. So I want to go a bit more top level again. So when moving into a new marketplace, and I guess the answers are going to be very different coming from all three of you. What are the main challenges that your clients are trying to overcome when moving into a new marketplace? And feel free to use a specific marketplace as an example. But I would love for our listeners and attendees today to get an idea of what those hurdles are and those main blockers are that they're going to come across, that hopefully you guys can help them out with, but that they should be prepared for.
Yeah,
Okay.
so go ahead, Nick.
Okay, so I guess let's start with Europe. So VAT is the first thing, without VAT, I mean, you cannot import outside of the EU, you cannot set up your Amazon account. So this is the first thing. And because you wait 2, sometimes up to 5 months to get the VAT, depending on which market. So for example, Germany is probably the one with the most demand. Italy and Poland are one of the easiest ones to get the VAT, and Spain is probably the hardest. So in Spain, you wait up to 5, even 6 months, because they require original documents, notary translation, all this kind of stuff. It takes a lot of time. So obviously, this is the first thing that you need to handle, because when you set up the VAT registration, then there is a wait time. And during this wait time, you can actually handle the logistics, the customs, and the translations. And you actually start preparing everything else. But you need to wait for the VAT. It doesn't happen just like that, because we used to have some clients who came to the website, they register for the VAT, and they call the next day, hey guys, where is my VAT? Okay, I mean, it doesn't happen like that. I mean, you just need to wait, and that's why you go first with the VAT. Actually, Pearl is gonna tell us more about the other markets, but it just takes time in Europe. That's it. And that's why we recommend companies not to listen to Amazon, because Amazon a lot of times is telling brands, okay, go and do the PAN-EU, register for 5, sometimes 7 VAT registration, which is not good advice, because these are 5 different countries, different regulations. You can get the one VAT right now, you can wait for the other 3 months. So you go into a lot of costs, a lot of bureaucracy, and you don't need to do that. I mean, to start selling in Europe. So just start with one. We always recommend Germany after Brexit, because it's like the biggest in Europe, central location, all this stuff. And then you can actually start set up all the marketplace in Europe. You can obviously set up the localization, listings, translations, and you can actually do like you guys are doing in the PPC. You can see ABC testing their markets. And once your assumption is correct, okay, I'm selling well in France, then it makes sense to set up the VAT there, set up the fulfillment and all this stuff. But this is what we advise. And this is how we do it on our end. And then of course you can keep on adding VATs as you grow. But this is just from our point of view.
Yeah, with such long lead times in actually getting that VAT set up, would you recommend anyone like registers for that VAT, even if they're not planning on moving into those markets just yet, so that they can get that out of the way? Or is that
no? I mean, you cannot do that. I mean, the tax authorities are going to ask for proof that you're going to do business in Europe, like your Amazon store link or like a contract with the logistic company. We had some aggregators who wanted to do that, to have like VAT registration ready to go in the acquire brands, but tax authorities, I mean, they just don't do that. I mean, you need to have a quite running business because, you know, in Europe, I mean, we're a big country now, there is a lot of VAT scams. So they're doing that on purpose, because if you have too many companies with VAT, you can actually do some things which are not, and this is actually why they changed the VAT regime, to avoid that, but this is another discussion. So you cannot just have the VATs waiting for you. I mean, so that's the short answer.
Thanks for asking that. I'm clearly not the expert on this, but I'm sure some other people might have been wondering that same thing. So yeah, any other main blockers or hurdles or challenges that your clients are experiencing when moving into marketplaces that you've helped them deal with, either yourself, Pearl, or Jana?
Just going to add to what Nick just said. Aside from, let's say, not needing a contract or an agreement to show you're actually going to do business in Europe, you actually have to file your taxes as well. So that becomes a huge headache once you start getting these letters letting you know that you need to file your taxes, even if it's zero, and people start freaking out when that happens. So I have seen sellers that had that before. So something I would also say to stay away from. One other big obstacle people or sellers face is product compliance. Product compliance, meaning to say, usually it ends up being with items that either are ingestible, go into the body, or touch the body. Usually, vitamins, supplements, health and beauty kind of products. Sometimes it's, kid products that need special licensing or approvals. So I would advise, even before tax registration, before anything, you should do your product compliance check first. And that's something we do help with internally as well. The reason being, you might find yourself in a situation where your product needs 6 months of approval or sometimes longer. And I'm saying these are like the worst case scenarios, or, situations where certain products just do fall into that category. Obviously, general goods, things that are, regular stuff, such as like, I'm just looking at my desk, like a mouse for the computer, that would be something that would probably be easily shipped. But of course, you want to make sure, let's say with the batteries, what are the requirements on how the compliance works? Do the batteries need to be inside the device when I'm shipping it? Could it be outside the device? Could it be shipped by air or only by sea? Things like that. You want to make sure you check those things out before even getting yourself registered, because you could be in for a long journey on the product compliance side. And again, that shouldn't be a reason why sellers should, shy away from getting started internationally, but it would be another reason why you would be, let's say, more successful than somebody else, because you actually are putting in the work. First things first, check to see if your product needs compliance or not, then move into the registration side of things.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess the same question over to you, Jana.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can just piggyback off of what Nick and Pearl said about VATs, about product compliance. Those are all literally big nightmares, because people think like, oh yeah, we're just gonna do that, and then they're waiting for their German VAT number to receive it in like 6-7 months, and it takes a very, very long time. And also, I would say that people think it's very easy to just kind of pick a product and it's going to be successful everywhere, and sellers never do their due diligence. Like, I would say that less than 85% of sellers have no clue what they're doing when they expand internationally. So it usually backfires pretty bad to them. And of course, when expanding to what Pearl mentioned, Japan, which I think is a fantastic marketplace. I think language barrier is like one of the biggest problems over there, because it's like the alphabet is different. It's like tons of like different things, new things. It's a completely different world over there as well. So there are a lot of things that you should be aware of when you expand, and that is that VATs are a nightmare. You probably want to get someone that's going to do that for you. All sellers who've been trying to do that but themselves have had terrible experiences, and you will definitely make a wrong step at one point. And then product compliance, it's also something that can set you back long way. So definitely you have to do your homework before you want to go abroad by doing a little bit of the market research, setting aside a budget for everything you need done additionally. So I'm not saying it's difficult. I'm just saying there are things and you need to prioritize before you actually involve yourself and your brand and your team into going and selling internationally.
Thank you.
Just to add something, we had a chat with Pearl earlier. It's about like a saying that we have in Bulgarian, like measure 7 times, cut once. So when you're expanding globally, check 7 times and actually expand once. So obviously you need to do your homework. You need to find the local partners, and then you can actually prepare and make the step. Another thing that we discussed earlier, that's what I've heard from a lot of clients, partners, agencies. The threshold that you should be doing in the USA before you consider going to Europe is doing 1 million in sales per year. So if you're doing less than that, you're not financially ready, because we need to set up like a new warehouse. So probably Pearl and Yana can confirm or tell me what they think, but this is what I've heard from on our end. 1 million, and then you're ready to expand outside of, let's say, the USA.
I would say we've seen slightly different. I guess because our niche in regards to when it comes to the shipping part of it is small parcel delivery. We don't specialize in shipping by sea. Our specialty is shipping loose back shipments, so sellers could start at much smaller and there's less risk. And we've seen sellers that their product just somehow didn't work for them in the US. I'm talking US based sellers, just it didn't work for them, and they're doing way better in the UK or in Canada. It's something that they've put an effort towards, and their product somehow is being taken on better. Maybe because of the saturation, less listings, less people competing for the same product, but for them it worked better. So it really depends. I would say, instead of looking at it from a sales threshold, which is how Amazon looks at it, we work very closely with the Amazon global selling team, and the threshold for them usually is $1 million plus to work with a seller and help them, hands-on expand. I would say instead look at it as far as how much time and effort have I actually put into this marketplace before saying I have reached my limit. I've done everything I can. I've gotten the best pictures done. I've gotten the best listings done. I have the best reviews I could possibly get. And if you've reached that status of saying, okay, we've done everything we can, then I would say let's look into new marketplace opportunities.
Okay, Pearl, one question. So what do you think would be like the threshold? I fully agree with you that sometimes something which is not selling well in the USA, you might find it actually selling better in a market which is easier. But let's say, how much is the financial, like how much money do you need to actually go on expansion, let's say to Europe or let's to Japan?
So it all depends on the type of product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I usually recommend sellers to expand to Canada first, just because it's less of an investment. There's one number they need to get, which is the NRI number, non-resident ID. So that's an easy way of really transitioning into something new. And the investment is just as much as product as they want to send in, which I always recommend sending in just a box or two. Amazon's limitations are 50 pounds a box usually. I'm not sure how much that converts to in kilos, let's say for the UK or Europe. I'm guessing around 20 something kilo. But as long as you ship just the minimal amount that you can, that could be something that you could really get a taste for. And again, the cost really depends on how expensive is your product. It could be somebody that's selling school supplies and it's cheap and it's going to be just a couple $100 and it doesn't work out. It's a tax write-off. That's fine. At least they gave it a try. So yeah, I would say just a couple $100 would be the investment to start.
Brilliant, thanks. Let's talk about shipping now. So I guess over the past two and a half, nearly 3 years now, we've seen costs of shipping and selling increasing because of COVID. The raw materials, the prices were going up, the shipping containers themselves were going up, the ports were getting congested, so prices were going up. What is the best way to handle this? How can we plan ahead for these costs and potential further rises in costs in shipping and selling? And what strategies could then be used to remain competitive, or even, dare I say it, remain afloat?
So that's a very loaded question, right? Because no one was able to forecast what COVID is going to cause for the world, unfortunately, and nobody thought that the stream ship lines are going to take the opportunity to absolutely go crazy on the rates, which thankfully went down now. So the way people traditionally used to prepare for Q4 or whatever season was the season for their product was literally just a 12-week threshold. They used to place an order with their manufacturer. Usually took about 4 or 5 weeks to get their product, let's say from the US into the California port. Takes maybe 2-3 more weeks, let's say, to get it into the UK, and that's how people used to plan it out. Now what people are trying to do is at least plan a quarter ahead or quarter before, and that's how they're able to make sure they have enough stock. The issue a lot of sellers are facing now is that they overstocked, and that's a huge bootstrap for a lot of businesses where their cash flow is in their inventory. So I guess the happy medium, right? That's really what people are going to try to figure out. What is that happy medium between going crazy, which if you look at reports, you'll see that Walmart and Target and even Amazon have you have the biggest professionals in the world have over forecasted what the next couple months were going to look like for them, and they're all stuck with extra inventory. We saw the announcements Amazon made where they're now a 3PL because they took up so much more space than they actually needed. So unfortunately, it's not something that you could say like this is the actual formula on how to place my order and know exactly what to do. But we definitely see from the past what people have done is gave themselves about a quarter before to place orders for their season. Now they did it 2-3 quarters before, I guess, in a happy medium in between that. But obviously this season is going to be very telling about what people will be doing for Q1 and Q2 of next year. So again, we do see the rates are going down, thankfully. Fuel, unfortunately, when it comes to air shipping, fuel is still pretty high, but we do see it going down slightly. So we hope by next year things should balance out a lot more. But what people should take into consideration is that these rates are here to stay when it comes to, let's say, the extra fuel and things like that. Unfortunately, it's very hard for companies like DHL and UPS and FedEx, which are the companies we work with, to bring your shipments over. Once a new fee is introduced, it takes a while until that gets taken away. Those extra surcharges and those extra fuel surcharges. So we'll see what happens, but these are the things that people should take into consideration. What is fuel going to cost me? What are the COVID surcharges, which is unfortunately still being charged? What are those extra surcharges going to cost me? And factor those things in. And of course, don't go crazy with ordering, which is what a lot of people have done this past quarter.
Brilliant, thanks. Nick or Yana, do you have any insights on that, or should we move on to another topic?
Yeah, actually, I can give a feedback. When I was running my e-commerce business, my business partner always wanted to order a lot of stuff, and I always want to order. So once we finish, the next shipment is arriving the same day. So forecasting is hard. Every business owner would like to make an order. So once they're over with the stock, the new one is there already without overstocking. But I think this is very hard. And like Pearl said, that's probably you can just use the data from previous months. Of course, it's hard when you're expanding, but there is nothing that you can do, I guess. You cannot be like perfect. You cannot forecast that. I was always trying, and we never did that. We ran out of stock or without stock for, let's say, a week or so. So this is just from my experience. So the good thing is that container prices are actually down right now. So that's at least a good news.
Yeah, and I know it's probably impossible to forecast any of these things happening, like global events, whether it's economical or geographical. But have you seen that your clients are a lot more on it themselves in terms of keeping an eye on their inventory levels and shipping and cost of goods and those prices since COVID? Like, have they learned the hard way about making sure they're stocked up with their inventory? Guess that goes to anyone.
Yeah, I go for it.
Me for the inventory. So basically,
Anna
I
always
mean,
has what to say. She always has the data, the numbers. That's why I love having her talk to anybody I could find.
yeah, well, I mean, I've just recently found out that they have increased the stocks for the products. So they're just gonna like, that's what I've talked to a couple of sellers that told me this. So this is exciting. I guess they're just kind of doing that just before because there are gonna be like a lot of events. Like there's gonna be like the second Prime Day. There's gonna be Halloween. There's gonna be Christmas. There's gonna be like a lot of things. So I think the situation with the inventory is probably like for the time being going to be slightly better. I don't know how it's going to be like this, like next year was going to happen, but I think what Pearl said about like, getting your products sourced in Europe just because of the dollar versus Europe balance, that's kind of not what we were hoping for. Is really, really interesting. And especially because if you are a seller in Europe, it's literally now the first time that like people will be able to source something on your own continent, which I think has a lot of advantages, and they can definitely help you have inventory in time and not be like left out of stock, which is like the biggest problem, like the worst nightmare for everyone. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to mention that Canada opened up 2 new fulfillment centers just this month. So that for all those sellers that are going a little bit crazy in Canada, because Canada did have the most restrictions in the recent months when it came to limitations with inventory. They did open up 2 fulfillment centers, which we should hopefully see some increase of limits. And just in general, across the board, just like Yana said, last year, this time is when Amazon did start opening back up the limitation. So, Amazon is just as much inclined for sales like anybody else. I mean, probably more than anybody else. So there's no reason why they would leave things shut down. So they will, and I've heard this from inside information that in the next couple of weeks, people should start seeing, things getting loosened up a lot more.
Brilliant. I didn't know they'd opened up 2 new fulfillment centers. So
yeah, just literally last 2-3 weeks.
Awesome. And I guess while we're on the topic of sort of shipping and fulfillment, is there anything important that our listeners today should know or be prepared for in regards to customs clearance? Who is that best directed at? Is that you, Pearl?
Yeah, I guess I could answer that. Yeah, so something that's really important is making sure that they're classifying their products in the best way possible. So what people don't realize is that when you're shipping, let's say a watch or clothing, things like that, and you're not classifying it with something called an HS code or a harmonized code or a tariff code, every country calls it something else, but it's pretty much a number that customs identifies exactly what you're shipping. And if you don't include that number and you're just putting an item description on your commercial invoice, it's called, which is sort of like just, a receipt or an invoice for customs to know exactly where you're shipping from and to, and who is actually paying for the taxes, who's paying for the shipping, what are you shipping. So that invoice, you do want to be very clear with this number of exactly what you're shipping. So customs won't do what they usually do, which is if you just put on an item description, they'll look for the most expensive classification on file. And a lot of people end up making this mistake where they end up losing quite a bit on their first shipment, because that's usually when you start learning things, right? So I would say if you're shipping, let's say a watch that's, a children's toy watch, and it's not a gold Rolex, right? You want to be very clear on what that is, because otherwise you're going to be paying through the roof on taxes, shipping into the UK as well. When it comes to children's clothing, it's actually going to be, duty free unless you are shipping adult clothing. So it's something that you want to be very, very clear about when you're shipping. Otherwise, again, you're going to be very surprised when you get that first bill.
Yeah, I've actually heard Steve Simonson talk on this topic of tariffs specifically in relation not just to sort of like customs clearance, but even in like sourcing and coming up with ideas for your products. And one of the examples he had was a woman's coat, and he said it ended up being cheaper when the manufacturer made it waterproof for some reason. So the tariffs became cheaper. And even if you added an external pocket. So I think even outside of making sure that you've got those different product breakdowns listed for when you're doing customs clearance, but actually you can potentially make it a lot cheaper during the manufacturing stage if you research what benefits you get from the different tariffs. That was really mind-blowing when he was talking about that. He almost did it like a comedy sketch, but yeah, there's so much to look into when you're sourcing, researching, manufacturing, even getting down to shipping your products.
Yeah, so I think it comes down again to the one thing that we discussed earlier, partners, having the right partners. Because see, I have like 1,000 partners in my network and agency. The hardest niche was finding a customs partner in Europe. And obviously, I'm not sure what Pearl thinks about that because they do that. But in Europe, there is so many companies. All of them are old-fashioned. They charge crazy pricing. Some of them are not reliable. And like you guys just mentioned, no, if you don't have like a good partner to advise you properly, you might be losing money. You might get in trouble, and this is not good when you're expanding. So,
yeah, very much agree.
Thanks, Nick. I've got a question here for you as well, Nick, in regard to VAT regulations. I know we briefly touched on it, but are there any differences when it comes to variations in shopping categories or even product typing groups?
there is like in some markets, there is like different VAT for different products. But actually, this is what we do with the software. Now, once we set up the account with us, we can actually check, because in some markets, you even might not have VAT. So we actually do that with the software, but it varies from country to country. That's why we have tax advisors in each market. So it's not like just the software, but we have the people who actually can check on that. But yes, there is such thing in Europe.
Brilliant, thank you. And is there anything else that you'd like to share around the topic of sort of VAT registration or VAT?
I think the VAT registration that we mentioned earlier is that obviously what Pearl mentioned, that besides the VAT registration, regardless of the sales that you do or you don't do, you need to do reporting. That's why it's not smart to do multiple VATs, because besides having the registration, you would need to do the filing monthly or quarterly. And you just need to do that until you deregister. So the smart way to do that is obviously set up one. Let's say if we're talking about Amazon, let's say Americans or USA are selling in Europe. So they should go to, like I said, Germany, get the VAT there, no translation needed for the documents. They can use the Amazon FBA in Germany. They can sell all the European marketplaces. Then after that, the good thing is that a lot of sellers don't know is that when they're non-EU sellers selling on Amazon, Amazon is collecting the VAT. So you don't need to even bother with the returns. They're going to collect the VAT. They're going to pay that to the tax authority. So, but this is only for Amazon. If you're using Shopify, for example, Shopify is not a deemed supplier. So Amazon is the so-called deemed supplier. So they have to collect the VAT for non-EU sellers. So in the case with Shopify, you would need to register for another thing called one-stop shop. And the one-stop shop allows you to hold stock, let's say in a FBM, like in a fulfillment, 3PL, whatever, in Germany, and make deliveries to B2C clients across the European Union. And this is, again, one VAT plus the OSS, but this only if you sell on Shopify as well. And the difference is when you sell on Shopify is that in this case, you would need to report, as you do on Amazon, the sales that you're doing, but you need to also pay the VAT return. I mean, it's a little more complicated, but the easiest way to expand is from Amazon, because one VAT, they take care. We do the reporting for them. Amazon take care of the VAT return, and you just need to obviously enable the marketplaces, sell on them. And of course, once you see that you're actually doing good sales, then you can do the next steps. And I think this is what I always recommend. I mean, this is the easiest way, at least for Europe.
Makes sense. And Nick, I want to add that Amazon did announce at Accelerate that they're going to have, I guess they're going to work out with this whole entity thing. Like Tom, you mentioned that. I think maybe you thought it was already something that they had, but they're going to have this option where one VAT number will be good enough to ship to all their fulfillment centers. So they said that's going to happen within the next year,
Okay.
but it's something that sellers should know about.
Yeah, and that'll just make it so much easier. It's one less stress to deal with, right?
Exactly. And, I guess the filing is something they'll have to do all over, but the actual registrations will just be one.
Yeah. A lot of our UK clients actually stopped selling internationally, especially on mainland Europe during Brexit. They've recently started, some of them have recently started selling again in the mainland EU now that, I don't want to say things have died down, but they kind of, a lot of those regulations and restrictions have kind of ironed out and they've got a lay of the land. Do any of you three have any stories or advice or even any myths that you want to or could debunk that would encourage our listeners to perhaps expand again after they kind of pulled back and just pulled all their resources and selling back into the UK or even their own localization?
Yeah, from my end, what I would say is that there's been a lot of miscommunication, obviously, from, you're talking from the government end of things, the actual rule makers, right, for better lack of words. But what we've seen is that we've done so much research before, Brexit happened on how US based sellers, let's say, or UK based sellers are going to be able to get through the border, which was now, a thing. So what we've done is come up with a really, really foolproof solution that we worked with the carriers to come up with. And what we found is that instantly when Brexit happened, it was as if no research was done because these regulations just came out of nowhere. So I think there was like a lot of miscommunication that they themselves had. And, instead of saying like, okay, this is what you guys need to do, it was like one rep saying one thing, another rep saying something else, and it became impossible. So we came up with a solution to go through the Netherlands to get into, let's say, Germany. But we definitely see that things have changed quite a bit. And I think that, with education, obviously things get better and things become easier. So as long as you do check things out in advance before you actually start, like I said, the product compliance is a huge piece that people need to look into, the same for Europe, but making sure that your product is compliant, from the selling end, where Amazon allows you to sell those products and not like you're starting to list and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is considered hazmat, or, it's considered a dangerous good, and things like these things is something you should be looking into. And then of course, on the shipping side of things, you want to make sure that your product is compliant to be able to be shipped. And, what is that process to get that thing going? And I think that the fact that people started doing it without putting in the resources or the time to research exactly how to do it, and then they got held up and it got stuck in customs, which I know a lot of people had, that is the reason why people, are very hesitant now. But people should know that there is a process on how to do this. And as long as you are working with the right resources to make sure your product is compliant and you can get your product in successfully, you should be doing really, really well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
So we're coming to the end of our time before we head on to some of the Q&As. But what I want to do is I want to give you all a chance to share one big takeaway. So one top tip or one big mistake that you want our listeners to avoid. And I'm going to ask that to all three of you because you've got very different angles that we're coming from here. But also at the same time, feel free to plug anything or any deals that you've got with your companies. Because thank you for joining us today. And one top tip or one big mistake to avoid, and plug away.
So I'll go first. I have a really good tip when expanding to Germany. It's about keywords, and a lot of people don't do a great job with that. But even though some of them know what they're doing, so tools like Helium 10 and like all these other tools, they're set up to be used first and foremost by English speakers and for English language, which means that like when you have a long tail keyword, you will have two different words, and this is how it's set up to be like that. So like all these tools have like the option which says word count, and then it doesn't say anything, but it's set up by default as 2. So you're gonna get 2 different separate words. But the German word has like these like long, chunky keywords. They're actually compound words. It's like actually one word. So when you do this research, not necessarily these compound words will show up. And these compound words are really like, they're used widely in the language, like, and you can express like literally like a whole sentence with just like this one word. So they're not like rarely used, and they're just like part of everyday language. So what you need to do is like in the tool, let's say Helium 10, if you're done the keyword research as you should go back, and then on the word count, you should put number 1, and then all of these compound words will show up, and they're usually going to be like top 50 keywords, but they're not necessarily going to be shown in the results how you usually would do them. So you would have to do that for Germany and also the Netherlands once it's kind of more established. But this is something a lot of people don't know about. That's why they don't get good results, and they think they have all the keywords and covering everything that their competitors do, but it's definitely not like that. So that's my tip.
Brilliant. And have you got anything to plug?
Oh, the plug, yeah. Oh, I would like to plug our, it's a new thing. It's a report that we're gonna do. So if you don't know if you wanna start selling, maybe you haven't even thought about it, what we do is like, you can just send us a product you're selling, or, you know, maybe you want to sell on international marketplaces, but you don't know how to do your due diligence. So we do that for you. It's a one-of-a-kind report that covers everything from like selling, like the sales volume and the competitors, and what are they doing good, what are they doing bad. Like we kind of point out to the holes, like where you can basically get ahead of your competitors. And we also ask the actual audience, like let's say German buyers from the Amazon, like if they would buy a product, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. So we kind of put all that in a report, and we're getting like really good feedback, because doing due diligence before expanding internationally is very, very important. So we do that for you from like the content and the sales aspect. So if you guys are interested, there's a form on our website under contact us, and you can just fill it out and say that you're interested in a report, send us a product, and it'll get 14, 15 pages PDF in a couple of days.
Amazing. Sounds like a great offer. Thank you. Pearl, any top tips or takeaways or big things that our listeners should avoid?
Yeah, so I'm going to mention something really simple, but like Chad Rubin, he actually was the founder from Skubana, which they sold, and now he started a new tool called Prophecy, which is pretty cool. People should check it out, a pricing tool. But what he always said is like, the things that I think are trivial or silly in English are actually things that people are not aware of. So just putting it out there, a mistake people should avoid when you're selling in a new marketplace. You do want to be careful that all the duties and taxes, the importer on file or on record, as most people relate to it as, should always be the shipper, should never be Amazon. People are traditionally familiar, or traditionally that's how it's done, that the receiver is always the responsible party when it comes to shipping. But if you are starting out now selling internationally, be careful that all duties and taxes, the importer, any liabilities whatsoever is always descriptive to the shipper. And the way to put that on your commercial invoice that we discussed earlier is by using the terms DDP, which is duties and deliveries are paid for, or DAP, which also includes the freight cost. Again, if anybody has any deeper questions, they can always feel free to reach out to me and I'll direct you to our team. But that's a mistake that, you know, a lot of sellers are not aware of. And I'd love to extend an offer for our listeners today for a free NRI registration. If you're looking to expand into Canada, we believe it's a very easy gateway into, you know, the whole expansion category. So if you're looking to expand from the UK into Canada today, or any other place into Canada, we'll be very happy to do the NRI registration for you for free. Just mention ClearAds and we'll get it done for you, which is $349 in value, just so people know that.
Incredible saving. Thank you, Pearl. And finally, any top tips, any big things that our listeners should avoid, and then a plug?
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say that they should do their due diligence, and actually Anna told me what they're doing. So that's why actually whenever I talk with with client, we send them to her about the translation. So now they're gonna do the due diligence as well. So probably the main tip about expansion is first, never make assumptions. Don't assume that if you're doing great in one market, you will do that in the other. So always test, do the due diligence. Never put all your actual eggs in one basket. I did this mistake with my business where relying fully on like on Facebook and Google Ads. We're doing probably $500,000 in ad spend per day, and this is spent all our accounts. And this means we're going to zero. So that's why it's good to, even if a market is smaller, just to have like an alternative. So we can test out. And like the tips on from the VAT side, I think Pearl mentioned that having the right partners so I don't get into trouble. And on the VAT side for health tax, I mean, like I said, no, just go to Germany. This is the easiest, the most demanded market. And if you're an English speaker, I mean, this is the place to go. As simple as that. And because of that, we're actually giving away free VAT registrations, each one worth €300 to anybody who would like to expand in Europe. So we're going to help you with the VAT, and we're going to hand you over to Yana to help with the due diligence translations, and then Paul is going to finish you guys with the rest, and then you will be set up in Europe, and then you can do Canada, Japan, and you can go on vacation in the Caribbean after that in 1 or 2 years after we exit. So this is the fairy tale story.
Big
Thank you
goals,
so-
Nick, big goals.
Yeah, big goals.
Hey, but that's the whole point. Dream big, right?
That's it.
Exactly.
Thank you. So moving on to the Q&A section. We haven't had any questions in the chat, but we do have a number of pre-submitted questions on registration. Some of them are quite broad, but the first question we've got here is, how big are the individual marketplaces? That's and how much can you grow from adding in additional marketplaces? And I guess that perspective changes from what marketplace you're currently in.
Yeah, and it depends on your product. It really, I mean, it's a kind of question that you have to respond. But I mean, I hate when I have to respond like it depends. But I mean, it really does depend, depending on the product, on your strategy, on the marketplace. I mean, there are like a lot of factors that are involved that can bring you X amount of money. Because if you see someone like being great, successful in Germany, it doesn't mean it's a good marketplace for you. So it very depends on like what you do, what's your brand, how much you're going to invest in it, what's the story telling you're going to have like with your brand. I mean, there's so many factors that involve that. But we've had sellers that like had they were like doing 7 figures in the US, and then they were doing 7 figures on all European marketplaces combined. So they were basically doing like the same revenue as they are in the US. And then we've had like other sellers that like did not do so well, or others that did better in Germany than in the US. For instance, like with wooden toys, they were like doing amazingly well in Germany alone, and they were not that successful in the US, for instance, because they couldn't handle the competition, and it was just they did not handle it well. So I would say it's pretty unique, like from case to case.
Yeah. And then the next question is fairly similar and fairly broad as well. How much does it cost to add a new marketplace, and where are those costs likely to be? I guess that's a fairly good question. Like, what are the additional costs that people are going to see from adding in a new marketplace outside of the things I guess we've already covered today on this webinar?
Yeah, so I would just say it could be a couple $100 to thousands of dollars. It really depends on how the expansion is being done. It really depends if the product needs, let's say, a product compliance thing going, special approvals or special labeling and licensing. For example, there are products that need multiple languages on their labels, such as, food, things like that. But there are some easy solutions on how to do that, like peel away labels, and then there are those products that don't need to have the dual languages on it. So it really, really depends. So I would say before anything, just get those quotes out, price it out with more than one person. But of course, make sure you're pricing it with somebody that is able to make the process super easy and simple, and not somebody that likes to use big words. That's something that one of our core values is keeping it simple at Frisbee. And when there are those people that like to use big words in their webinars or presentations or their speaking engagements, those are the people that I'm usually afraid of, because when you need to make yourself sound very important and professional, it's usually because there's something you need to cover up on the what's the underlying reason, right? If you could make something simple, that's the purpose of a service provider, right? Getting the information needed and then just going for it. So I think that's something that people should look out for, but definitely make sure you're getting a quote for everything. Make sure it's included with everything and not any surcharges that might crop up at the end. That's something else that I would be, very, very specific about. And yeah, but once you have everything down pat, I think Nick gave a good summary, making sure first product compliance, number one, that you check that out, making sure you are set up with VAT or tax registration on, whatever they call it in those countries, making sure your listings are localized and translated well. And then of course that shipping is affordable for your product. You don't want to start figuring out after doing all these things that shipping is just an arm and a leg and it's not worth it. So making sure these 4 steps are taken into consideration. And then of course, returns is something that people should consider. If you're selling globally, returns is something that you are inevitably going to get. So you want to make sure that you're set up with that. So you have a solution in place for that and you have it quoted out and you know how that's going to work. So I would just say that, taking these things into account, giving yourself a ballpark price and how much these things would cost. And then obviously you'll know if it makes sense for your business or not.
Thank you so much. So that actually wraps up the end of the Q&A. There weren't many questions submitted, but thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us today. We've had a great panel of experts, and thank you once again to our panel here. It's been great hearing from you, Nick, Jana and Pearl. And just to all the listeners who have tuned in today, we will be sharing the recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll also be turning it into a podcast recording, which we'll also share on our socials as well. So feel free to share any of those playbacks with anyone else who you've got in the industry, whether that's a friend or a peer that you think could benefit from today's learnings and informations. So thank you for tuning into our second webinar, and we look forward to speaking to you again on our next upcoming webinar. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.